Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Stephen Miller, who is sports physio mentor at growphysio.com. So you've also got COVID currently, Stephen. So I'll try and keep it as short as possible. But thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. No worries. I've mustered some energy from somewhere deep within. Excuse the brain fog.
Well, we'll see how long it lasts for anyway. So it may be a bit shorter depending on your responses anyway. So we'll see how we get on. So whereabouts are you from originally?
I'm a Geordie, so Newcastle by background, really, which is where I spent most of my life up until a couple of years ago when we relocated to Manchester. So, came down. The missus came down for a job opportunity, and then this is where we are from now onwards for the foreseeable. And it's actually sunny on one of the 9 days a year in Manchester. We get sunshine. So it's
exactly. Whereabouts are you now then?
We're Didsbury. Sort of south
Manchester. You're in Didsbury. I'm in Didsbury.
Oh yeah.
I live about 50 metres from the Metropolitan pub.
Oh yeah, not too far. We're a little bit more villagey, but yeah.
Right, very good. So I'll have to watch out for you. I'm in town currently, but I live in Didsbury. Lived there for a while. Right, okay. Well, that's a coincidence.
That's quite a good start, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's a good start.
Set up a date already. Nice. Probably not for a couple of.
So when you were starting to get into doing physio, like what was your thought process for choosing that career profession?
Well, I originally had applied for medicine and was due to actually come down to Manchester after a gap year. But I went across to Toronto with a guy who at the time was a goalkeeper for Newcastle United. And we did a pre-season out there and we worked with a couple of physios out there and I fell in love with it. They were very much specialists. Big thanks to them. Steve Hill was his name, who ran a clinic across there, very into triathletes. So lots of Ironmen. There was a lot of sponsored Ironmen out there at the time, all cruising around in their Oakley sunglasses and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, sort of they saw a wide range of different injuries, ice hockeys, soccer players, lots of female ACLs that were sort of coming in. And I sort of realized that is probably actually a lot more me than medicine would have been, a lot more sort of practical. My background spent a lot of time working and playing sport as well. So yeah, I withdrew and then reapplied actually to do physio. So took a little bit of a detour really away from medicine. I think knowing more about myself now probably than I did back then, definitely the right decision for me, just considerably less money.
It's not all about money, is it? Kind of.
Happiness. All about the happiness.
It's all right. You've gone for a surgeon in another way anyway, so you can get it that way. So in terms of going over there, so what was the reason you went over to Toronto? Was that to play football, or what was that for?
No, at the time I wasn't bad at football, and the guy at Newcastle was his old man was actually the goalkeeping coach and still is actually, sort of 20 years on. And we actually just went across really to basically get fit as a pre-season. So spent about 3-4 weeks out there staying with them, trying to broaden my horizons, spread my wings, all that kind of stuff as a 18-year-old who just finished A-levels. And yeah, sort of rather than going on a lad's holiday straight away, went there first, got a little bit fitter and then probably unpicked it all on a lad's holiday a week after that. But yeah, it was a really good experience, really. And then, yeah, they had lots of cool bits of kit, like a Swim-X, so you could run against currents and swim against currents and analyze gait and running patterns. And he still is one of the best physios I think I've ever come across in terms of the eye for looking at the way people move, identifying inefficiencies, and then obviously putting a plan together that would obviously kind of put them right, really.
Right. So was biomechanics, was that a big thing in the UK at that point?
I wouldn't say, from my understanding at the time, I don't know, to be honest. I think it will forever be part of physiotherapy, where we look at the way people move and are there predispositions that really sort of cause people to be more predisposed to injuries than others, or inefficiencies, and trying to get that. I know, sort of talking to someone, I'm sure you know, a guy called Dave Hancock. He was talking about doing a blind screen quite a few months ago, which is really interesting, not getting any background of any injuries whatsoever, but just analysing the way people move and then almost trying to work out what were the problems. So a different approach in terms of almost, rather than that traditional going through a medical style assessment that we would do with a new signing, for example. Yeah, almost checking every single joint bit by bit, the way people move. And then, yeah, try and correct and put together plans that will stop them getting injured and sort of make them better athletes, really.
Yeah, and so what was it then when you were in Toronto that made you think, actually, I do want to get into the physio side of things? And was it purely working with the guy you mentioned?
Yeah, I think probably for me, it felt a more comfortable environment that I was more familiar with, a bit more excited about. I know most people have got a history where they've had an injury themselves, haven't they? I thankfully hadn't had any injuries, but I did have that passion, desire to probably help people on that process. So seeing how people were built up post-injury and then obviously kind of building them up that way, right back into their sport, was something that I'd always wanted to eventually end up doing. And fortunately, I ended up doing that and stepping into a full-time role eventually at Newcastle Falcons Rugby CLub up in Newcastle. And that was for me sort of the epitome, really. I'd sort of dreamed of doing that for a long time, but it probably took me about 12 years-ish to almost get enough experience and things from there to step into that world. Because it isn't easy to get into if you don't know people and you want to achieve a baseline of CPD, of clinical reasoning, of doing your masters, all these sorts of things, and achieve other life things, really. So yeah, eventually got there, which was sort of the epitome for me, and then spent a fair bit of time, sort of 6 seasons at the club, and then stepped out when we relocated to Manchester.
Right. So do you target rugby particularly?
No, I actually fell into rugby purely because of a colleague who worked with a National 1 side. So I don't know if you know, rugby National 1 is probably the equivalent of like Division 1 football, really. So it is a national league. It isn't a full-time role. It's a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday sort of setup, really. But it is nationwide, a club called Tyndale. So I went and covered there for her for a couple of sessions, and then eventually sort of became a more sort of regular fixture in that world. And then I ended up there for about, again, sort of 6 or 7 years, really. It seems like I get a 6 or 7 year hitch sort of itch thing, really. But yeah, that was an amazing thing. Eventually becoming sort of lead physio across there. And then I think that was probably the ideal into the Falcons, obviously being rugby. I didn't have any specific interest, I wouldn't say, in a particular body area that I was solely, some people do, don't they? You get physios who solely want to focus on an ACL or a foot or an ankle or whatever. Whereas for me, I think in those early days, and I say this to quite a few people, like, think about the sport that if you want to work in, if there's a particular injury cohort or type of athlete you want to be with, then think about what that sport is going to create. And for me, rugby had everything. It had concussions, spinal problems, upper limb, lower limb, muscle tears, ligament tears, big joint kind of injuries, cartilage stuff, short-term turnarounds, Saturday to Saturdays, and also the longer-term athletes that were in rehab, really. So it really gave me a bit of everything, which worked brilliantly for my mindset. I've then developed little specialities and things on the back of it. And I prefer rehabbing certain things, but again, I think not knowing what is going to come through the door, on that revolving door in that medical room where it constantly seems to spin in rugby, where people are always getting bumps, bangs, bruises, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's an exciting world to work in, because you do get such a wide plethora of different injuries and different individuals' personalities as well. So you've got, yeah, everything from sort of big natural built Polynesian athletes who are big, strong, powerful physique stuff, all the way through to some of the smaller people, a bit like my sort of build, who have to work quite hard to put on mass, to then, yeah, people who've just worked sort of in a different profession. We had a guy who was, prior to coming up to us, he worked in a brewery, just throwing kegs around, that kind of thing. And then amazing sort of rise to fame for him, spotted by one of the sort of forwards coaches, brought in, and then sort of been in and amidst the sort of England fray at the moment. So sort of 5 years on, an incredible journey for him. And then you've got all the private school people, personalities that come with that as well. So it's a real mixed bag, but I think it's an environment that we were lucky, I think, that it was such a close-knit environment, even though everyone was very different personality-wise, differences that I've heard in different sports and things, and it's dependent on the individuals and the culture. But we had an amazing bunch of lads who all really got along really well, were very sort of, it felt like a big family, if you like.
Yeah, and then so when you go in that environment, as you say, you can tell that you were trying to build up to get into this level of sport. So what was it like for you when you went in? Did you find that a daunting experience?
Yeah, I remember the first day actually, sort of pulling in my little Fiesta alongside some much bigger cars with the forwards and what have you. But yeah, I remember pulling in and sort of having a little bit of a moment where I sort of almost just stared and went, oh God, first of all, I can't believe I'm here on day one in full stash, head to toe. Second, the thing is, God, I hope I'm not pissing somebody off really, that I'm parking in their parking bay, because there's some big human beings knocking around. I don't want to annoy anyone. But yeah, I think it had been quite a long time in the making. So yeah, it was sort of when you get there, I think I was just sort of very keen to throw myself into it, with everything that I had, and I think I did that. I think the hours that you sort of end up committing to in a pro sport environment, you're very much at the beck and call and demand, as a lot of your other interviews have sort of alluded to, really. And it is demanding, and it does pull you away from other areas of your life. And you do have to have an amazing supportive family in the background as well to enable you to do it. So yeah, it was definitely an exciting moment. I think it's good to challenge yourself and push your boundaries and all that kind of thing. But yeah, that first day when he sort of said, look, you're in charge of the injury prevention program. I know you've planned it over the summer, blah, blah, blah. Off you go. And you're in the lion's den then, aren't you? You're basically you've got 26 players who don't know who you are to try and do a topic and deliver something that they're probably not overly mad keen on doing, which is probably why you end up getting stuck with injury prevention stuff, isn't it? To be fair, they always give it to the new physio, but yeah, yeah, a good environment, really, really good. If anyone gets the chance, really.
And then just going back a little bit, because I remember I looked at your past experience, and you'd done MLS coaching, which I thought was interesting. I did MLS, but it was for like the soccer camps, which may be different to what you did. But also, like, you've done some stuff around tennis as well. So was it your plan to get a broad range of things to work with, or was it just circumstantial?
Well, yeah, MLS was exactly the same. So when I finished my degree, that was post-degree, I did that actually, was across in California for sort of 3-4 months. Again, sort of coaching, probably similar to you, really. Anything from the little diddlies all the way up to sort of under 19s, really. And sort of, yeah, being set in an environment there. I did my tennis coaching. My background was very tennis and football. So when I took a gap year, I decided I was going to do a year of working, get a bit of money together prior to university, that kind of thing. And obviously when I switched from medicine to physio, I didn't have a guaranteed place, to be honest, because I'd already applied for a deferred entry for medicine. So I basically said, well, I want to try and get as many things on my almost CV, if you like, to try and make me a little bit more desirable. So I did my massage stuff. I did sort of certifications, sports massage diplomas, tennis qualifications, football qualifications, and all that kind of stuff. And I think, yeah, I ended up working at David Lloyd in that year, doing quite a lot of coaching and things that way, which again, sort of life experiences and things were really good. And that's probably still the year I've probably earned the most money I've earned this ever since then, to be fair, just coaching kids on a regular basis. And you kind of go from a decent wage into a starting physio wage, and it's a bit of a kick in the teeth, to be there.
Yeah, it's all on the journey. But I was a member of the tennis, the Northern Tennis Club. I don't know if you know the Northern.
Yeah.
I was a member there. We had a physio clinic there for a number of years, but we've sold it on now. But yeah, no, tennis and football were my sort of main passions as well. Was Gary Russell at MLS then?
He was.
Was he?
Yeah.
Right, he was still running the show.
The strength-based coaching man, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it all flopped, didn't it? I think on the back of
I think
something
it did. Yeah, I remember it was an interesting setup. Some of the MLS, it was they had some interesting people running it. But when you think of like I remember just turning up as I was 20 at the time, didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah, I hear you. You had a bag of cones, a bag of balls, and just free roam, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was. I remember like having to turn up, and I think I was coaching 3 and 4-year-olds in my first session. So it was like singing Old MacDonald whilst you're on the ball. It definitely wasn't coaching, but
Yeah, there's a bit of
all the
cheerleading.
parents watching you.
Yeah, I know. I think you probably guys had this as well. It was like a random costume day. I think on the end of the week. There was
Yeah.
some shockers, to be fair, that used to come in about. But yeah, there's actually a guy. I don't know whether there's a guy who I coach with over there. A guy called Ryan Conroy who has become a really good mate. Actually, he's just based sort of across in Altrincham. So yeah, we meet up and catch up about old times across in MLS world. It's good fun.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, I might have to tag along to one of those and recount some of the memories from those ones. Well, I ended up in Vermont, which was I loved it, but it was if you're in California and I was in basically the the forest. It was a slightly different experience, but no, it was good nonetheless. But I mean, I think those things are like so valuable for your career going forward. Anyways, like tennis coaching, I did some of that back in the day, but then also just being involved, going abroad, traveling, living somewhere else. Like, how important do you think those sort of things have been for you in your career?
Yeah, I think huge. And I always say sort of I've been fortunate enough to do both the sort of self-led traveling thing and working abroad. But I think the working abroad thing for a company, be it a Camp America or like we had the MLS sort of coaching things, if you have a skill set, I think it's a much better setup personally, because you end up staying, I'm sure you did the same, you sort of stay with host families and you're immersed in that culture, aren't you? And you actually get to learn a little bit more about the world rather than being maybe like a ghost just passing through a place and ticking it off and doing that classic one where you jump out of a bus, take a photograph or a selfie with you in. Do you know what I mean? You're just not immersed and you haven't learned anything. Yes, you've seen it and you've got a photograph, but I think that living somewhere, being part of like a little family almost gives you a little bit more security. I think certainly for me at the time, that was a much better option, and it sort of just happened. I was lucky that, and they're probably worth looking out for, aren't they? People at universities, there's always people traveling around trying to recruit people for these things, but I think they're brilliant. I don't know anyone who's had a bad experience, to be honest, doing something with a company that are established. I don't know about some of the other ones that aren't, sort of thing, but for me it was great. And yeah, you get the dream scenarios, don't you, where you get to stay sometimes on these millionaire gated communities, don't you, with your own pool. But I mean, we had the opposite as well. We're staying in sort of a little trailer on the side of someone's house, sort of thing. But you know what, I think it all just makes for great stories and memories. And I think before you settle down to work in a career, it probably gets a little bit harder, doesn't it, to take a career break? I'd certainly say, sort of after you've qualified or whatever. I mean, my hand was forced a little bit in terms of there were no physio jobs at all when I qualified. So I was across in the States. I remember getting my degree, having a little celebratory night out, and then trying to log on and trying to look for physio roles that were non-existent. There was stuff was coming on for about 2 days and then being taken off because there was sort of 50 to 100 applications per job. And some of the people at the time were physio assistants who then qualified as a physio or worked in other medical roles for sort of 5-6 years. So you had no chance really as a new grad, even with sort of a first class honours degree, you didn't stand a chance life skill wise. So yeah, in some ways it forced my hand a little bit, but I think it was definitely the right thing to do and I'd recommend it. I don't know whether you think the same.
Oh, definitely. No, I think anything like that is. I know I matured a lot as a very, very immature 20-year-old. I probably was still very immature 21-year-old, but yeah, it's just amazing to go and do that. You don't appreciate it really at the time, but yeah, it's amazing, amazing things to have done. So how did you solve that problem then? So when you came back from the States, like what did you go and do?
So I applied for loads of stuff, as I say, from the States. When I came back, there were still no jobs. So I stayed for about 6 weeks applying for loads of different jobs and just couldn't get one. So in the end, there was a company called Bunak who basically just sort of, I think 20 or 30 of you or whatever are kind of linked up together, but you fly out on the same round the world sort of route, if you like, but you can sort of, you likely, all of my friends at the time were either working or they were in uni or basically sort of were tied up with other things. So I just said, you know what, let's just jump on this. I'm probably going to meet 3 or 4 people who I think are all right and can toddle around with. I had some family dotted around in Australia along the way I knew I was going to go and see. But yeah, sort of I bought myself a little bit of time. Luckily, I'd sort of saved a bit of money sort of prior doing that. But yeah, I think that for me was a bit of a forced hand thing. And then bizarrely, when I was in New Zealand, I bumped into a girl and we had a mutual friend, and I just said to her, like, what are you doing when you head back? And she said, I'm starting work as a physio with this company. Why don't you give her a ring? And the two of us had worked at David Lloyd together. Bizarrely, the girl who sort of set up the work, and yeah, dropped her a message, set something up to come back to. It wasn't the long-term solution, but it would just get my foot in the door, get some patient mileage, sort of pay for, yeah, at least board and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, hopefully be a little platform, but at least I was going back to something. And then obviously while I was away, again, sort of the glitz and glamour of sort of sitting on a Bondi beach or whatever, I was still on my laptop trying to hammer away with applications and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was probably where I was. And then luckily for me, I ended up sort of jumping from that into a company called Connect Health, which at the time were phenomenal in terms of career development. They were really, really pushy with their CPD in a positive way. They basically gave you about a day and a half of CPD every single week as a new grad, which was exactly what I needed. I remember, again, sort of applying for it thinking, God, if I can just get my foot in this door, I've got a chance to accelerate my sort of musculoskeletal skills in particular, which is where I knew I wanted to go, because the alternatives were probably to go into like a traditional rotation setting, which has huge value. But for me, I just knew that I wanted to do MSK all along. And yeah, I think that took off. So for the first 9 months, basically with a day and a half of CPD protected time on something called the Accelerated Development Program that they had then. I think it's diluted quite a bit now compared to what it was, because it was quite a small company then, and now they're humongous in terms of their primary care presence and things. But yeah, that I was again very fortunate. I had a couple of friends who worked there, put in a good word. And then, yeah, sort of stayed there for 6-7 years, progressed through. They supported me to do my masters, and yeah, really positive things to say about them, really. Very hard work, but
well, that's great. That's what you want, isn't it, at that stage, I guess. I remember when early in my career, when I was selling for another company at that point, I was employed, but I met with the top people at Connect. It's a northeastern company, isn't it, based there? So I met with Andrew, and then, like, just a few years later, kept in touch on a few different things, but then they are just massive now. So we've had some contact from someone locally around here recently, and it's just, I know loads of people that have worked for them. They're very evidence-based, aren't they? And it's amazing, very impressive, the way that they've built that kind of public sector presence.
Yeah, incredible actually, because I don't know if you know the background. They basically started off with a little clinic in the northeast, as you say, and then sort of moved to Gosforth, which is like a little village in Newcastle, really. And they gradually sort of spread their chips across primary care, private high street clinics, and occupational health. And then they've just really focused in on the primary care world. And to be fair, absolutely smashed it. So fair play to Andrew. He's done really, really well. And a really great bloke, actually, with a massive love for rugby. So whenever we see each other, we just shoot the breeze on what's going on. He tries to pick me brains on what's happening behind the scenes. But yeah, they definitely accelerated enormously my career and gave me that platform to grow and build on, really.
I think that's really good. Good to hear you speak so positively about it, because they've obviously kept with their growth, you've still got good feelings towards them, which isn't all. It's quite difficult to get that commercial and sort of improvement combination, really. So no, that's good. That's good to hear. So just going back to the Falcons then. So what was that like when you were there? Like, was that something that was really frustrating that you had to leave, or did you feel like time was to move on?
It's an interesting one, because I think, thinking about it now, I think it is actually the perfect sort of timing for it to happen. I think the thing you can do is almost, I sort of laugh with the missus and say it was almost a bit like a Stockholm syndrome thing. You're sort of falling in love with your captor, really. You're there 6-7 days a week, long hours. Your off season is never an off season, because you're in taking players for surgeries and doing the other bits of sort of post-op rehab and tootling around the country, that kind of thing. So I think it totally has you, and I think you probably have to be that way minded. I know it's sort of typically put down, isn't it, as a sort of single man's game. Obviously, women can be involved, and certainly should be encouraged to do so. But yeah, as a sort of throwaway sort of line, people describe it as that, and I think you can see why, because it takes so much time when you're there, but it also takes so much time away from your family, your friends, all that kind of stuff. So I think I went 6-7 years again of basically missing a lot of weddings, a lot of stag do's, a lot of the kind of key moments that you maybe sort of can't get back again. And again, it's all a balance, isn't it? But I think it was such a brilliant time that I kind of think back to, and there's certain bits that I miss enormously, kind of stepping out of that world. But I think for the life work balance, it was the right time for me. I've got a 6-year-old boy who is phenomenal. Love spending time with him. And I think if I'd stayed in that world, I know that I would have missed a huge part of his childhood that I'm never going to get back. And I think at the moment, he's obviously in those blissful years where he still respects his old man, and he'll do as is told, and all that kind of stuff. But a great character. And yeah, I sort of think, you know what, if I hadn't stepped out of that professional world, or certainly that environment that I was working in there, where it was very time intensive, I would have missed out on a lot of those really precious memories. So I think for me, it came at the right time. I think my focus has probably shifted away from the need and desire to do it. I think it's the classic one, isn't it? If you've never traveled, everyone wants to travel. If you've never been to Australia, you want to go to Australia and see what it's all about. I feel very privileged that I've had the chance to step into that world, but now I feel like I've done that. I feel like I can step out of it a bit more comfortably. So yeah, very grateful for everyone who was sort of part of that journey, and stay in touch with a great deal of them. They've all become, a lot of them have become really good sort of lifelong friends, if you like. You're all similar minded, and you've lived in each other's pockets for years, and you get that sort of real connection, I think, with people when you're in that environment. But yeah, my shift now has sort of shifted towards sort of more teaching, more developing others. I've always loved CPD and used to spend almost every other weekend traveling around the country as a new grad sort of thing. So yeah, sort of I set myself up in a sort of teaching capacity. Random things happen on the back of it. Sort of ended up teaching at Sheffield Hallam, Gloucester. I'm running a little taping course down there. Went to Saudi Arabia about a month ago, bizarrely out of nowhere. Just again, recognition from the Grow Physio side of things that they wanted to share that across there. So again, they're just little things that I've kind of done something that I feel really passionate about through lockdown and around other work commitments. But yeah, little opportunities do come out, which is really nice.
So yeah, we'll come on to that bit. But when you were moving to Manchester, then, so when did you move to Manchester?
A month before lockdown.
Right. Okay. So did you have something lined up then when you were moving?
So this was the bit of a clanger, as you can imagine. So I moved down here. My old man is very much you need a full-time job with a pension and blah blah blah. Very safe. Like we always laugh and say, he's like the guy out of Meet the Fockers who does the risk assessment stuff. Do you know what I mean? Everything's like analysed to a T. So when I said, look, I'm going to go down, I'm going to work for a couple of days for Bupa, he's like, well, that's good. At least that's got a pension and you got whatever, but you need realistically to make that a full-time gig. And I came down locumed for like a private hospital down here to start with for 3 days of the rest of the week, really. And obviously when Boris had cancelled all of the elective surgeries, everyone who I saw was post-surgery. So when they cancelled all post-surgical stuff and wanted me to do the rehab for meniscus, ACL, shoulder recons, that kind of stuff, basically it all just dried up overnight. So They were like, thank you for your services, but we obviously can't keep you on because we've got no one else having surgery. So that was when basically I was left for about 6 weeks thinking, what am I going to do here? I really don't know. And then I sort of just had a little long, hard sort of think and discuss, what do I actually care about? Like, I don't want to go necessarily into a full-time sport gig, but I massively miss sport. I want to do a little bit more teaching and love CPD stuff. So spent a fair bit of time sort of going through some online CPD things to fill the time. The only roles that I had that were advertised were basically working with COVID patients as home visits or on wards. And if I'm honest, after about 15 years of working in MSK, my respiratory skills have been more of a hindrance than a help, to be honest. I think I probably would have boosted the death rate numbers, sadly, through no fault of anyone's really. But yeah, it was one of those bizarre ones, to be honest, where I just literally just did what I wanted to do. And I had like a 6-week gap where I was like, I can't work in respiratory. So what am I going to do? So I just did what I really enjoyed doing, and little bit by little bit started just offering some friends who were working in lecturing roles some free sort of, they were mad keen to have an hour off so I could go and do like a presentation for them online, that kind of thing. And I just did that little by little, putting bits of the material, the rehab, the sort of assessment bits that we'd pulled and I had on my phone and had recorded from days in the Falcons, and then basically pulled it all together, put it together to make some presentations, show some case studies of how some of these athletes do progress from injury back into their sport again, and how they get on, follow up, that kind of thing. And then I sort of realized it's probably not telling the whole story. So that was when I then broke it down to actually people need to know the theory of the injury. They need to know how to assess it, how to treat it, rehab it. And then actually the case study is probably the bit that wraps it all up together rather than being the whole learning journey. So then, yeah, I just went on a bit of a campaign again, just to try and sort of put all of that material together, share it with people. Yeah, and then little by little just went, well, actually, how can I help more people? And that was when my missus's best friend, she just put a website together with a Brazilian lady who stuck it all together and basically gave me her number. And then Grow Physio was born, basically, with a handful of different courses, and that sort of expanded and grown, if you like, to sort of, yeah, probably about 9 full comprehensive sports injury courses that you can access for, again, it was all meant to help all the physios who couldn't get any sort of practical skills or whatever. So yeah, it was all set up for £1 for 30 days, and then you could do a placement within a pro sport environment, really.
That's really good. Yeah, and so how long was that period then from you thinking, actually, I'm going to start doing some online CPD, to having that website developed and having it as a commercial live entity?
So I think probably around April was when the surgeries and all that kind of stuff finished. From what I remember, it was maybe May when I started to think, oh, I can put together this material, the teaching, again, with no intention of setting up it as a business, if you want to call it that. But then, yeah, sort of just some exciting things. Little sister had a friend who was like, well, I can design you a logo. So again, sort of went backwards and forwards thinking about that sort of exciting side of it. I think the creative side of me had probably been a bit quashed in pro sport, because you can only be so creative without, if things go wrong and people question you, you probably can't be overly madly creative with what you're doing. And I probably didn't have the headspace to do it either. But yeah, in terms of your question, probably from about April till I think around July, I think was probably when I was just going around putting material together to try and sort of help unis out, and did some talks for a company called Physique on their platform. And then probably from about July to October, that was when I thought, you know what, I'll get in touch, start putting a website together, look at how I can record these videos and rehab things in a suitable format that makes it sort of quite watchable and really sort of enhance learning. And then, yeah, probably around end of October, November was when the site launched. And I think, I don't know, in your head, you've been thinking for ages, haven't you? Like, it's like a film on the side of a bus. It's like launch date will be like the 20th of October or something like that. And you're like, oh, wow, it's going to hit the ground. People will be queuing up to watch this Grow Physio stuff. And obviously no one else knows about the journey you've been on. So you kind of set it up and then no one subscribes for a couple of months. And then you're kind of like, oh, that's a shame. I really need this to try and help. And I can't make it any cheaper than £1. And then, yeah, just little by little, really, I think it has grown. And yeah, I mean, the main thing for me is to kind of almost buy back time, if you like, to sort of spend with family, friends, that kind of thing, really. So I still work sort of 4 days a week, 2 days for Bupa in private clinics, 2 days in a sports injury clinic in Manchester, and then a day on a Friday. I'm sort of periodically doing teaching across at Sheffield Hallam Uni, that kind of thing. So yeah, so I'll probably wind it back a little bit so I can sort of have a focused day, putting material together, spreading the love of Grow Physio. But yeah, it's been a really good journey.
No, I think it's great to have done something like that, and it's just good to have like that passion project. You're obviously really passionate about physio, but also sharing that, and what a great way to do it. And albeit COVID has been terrible in a number of ways, it helps do things like this. It helps you with your platform, and I think it's really valuable tools.
Oh, great stuff. Thanks for that. Yeah, it has, and I think it's given me I bizarrely, again, that I keep going back to the quote of just do what you love to people, and just think about what you want. And I think sometimes it's a bit of a journey to work out what you actually do want to do. So I think if you are in a position that you sort of feeling a little bit unsure as to what your direction, purpose, what you want to do is, or you've just got red tape in all the companies that you work for, that kind of thing, then I think that's pretty normal. But yeah, just talk to people and eventually you'll kind of work it out, really. It wasn't anything I intended on doing, but I feel like I'm fully 2 feet jumped in and loving it, to be fair.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best way. I think if I'd have known how hard it was going to be to set Physigrip up, and I'm glad I didn't know, because the first 2 years was an absolute stinker. But you get through it, and then it sort of kind of goes from there. So no, that's really good. So no, I really appreciate you coming on this. Just before we finish, so who do you think who's had a significant impact on your career, either within the profession or not?
I think probably for me, I mean, there's been so many people, and I'm very grateful to a lot of them. I think probably a special mention really from the sort of Falcons world would be a guy called Simon Pope, he was head physio there at the time. There was 52 senior players, 2 physio. So me and him were under the cosh, pedaling unbelievably hard. But he is someone who took me under his wing, guided me, sort of sat down, again, protected me if things wherever was needed, and protected the whole team, to be fair. So I learned a lot from him, not only physio-wise, but also for me, almost the sort of people management side of things, both how to talk to coaches, cover yourself, make sure, just little tricks and clues, you know what I mean? Just obvious things like, I don't know, if you think it's going to be a 4-week injury, it's going to be you tell the coaches it'll be a 4 to 6 or a 4 to 8 week injury, depending on how they go. So you're the best physio ever if you bring them back at 4. But yeah, just a really good bloke. Rhys Griffiths, who stepped in after him. Again, once I'd sort of established myself with him coming in, I think probably him being quite happy to lengthen the reins, really, and just let me take players through their rehab themselves, and again be there as a bit of a safety blanket if anything was needed, any advice, guidance, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think there's been so many, to be honest. Again, as I said, sort of family are a huge one. They have to be there to support you. My missus has a super demanding job. My mum and dad have stepped in, as has her mum, obviously to try and look after the little one when needed, when we've both been under the cosh, because we both were, as I say, pedaling pretty hard at times, which was pretty demanding, and couldn't have done it without them.
No, it's great. No, it's really good. I think it is always hard to do that, but there were some really good examples. Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on when you're not 100%. So no, I do genuinely really appreciate that, and I've loved the stuff that I've seen of Grow Physio. So best of luck for that. I really commend you doing something it's not easy, is it? Creating something and speaking on camera and putting yourself out there to say, who wants to buy it. So I think it's great that you've gone for it.
No, thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's a bit of a brutal world sometimes, isn't it? There's a lot of haters and Twitter trolls out there.
Yeah, have you had some trolling then?
No, I haven't had many, to be fair. I've tried to nip a few of them in the bud, but yeah, I think I've just got bigger fish to fry than the odd little hater. But there's not many. I'm not a very controversial man, I don't think. You might say otherwise.
No. Say
This
so.
might be the catalyst for it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, we probably could do with a bit more controversy, actually. We might get a few more hits on this, but no, it's been great. Really, really enjoyed it. So I appreciate your time on it. And now we know we're neighbours in Didsbury, then we can definitely get together.
There's no stopping us now, is there? Lifelong pals.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Good man. Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate.